So over the last 50 years, you've got an inflationary wind that even exacerbates racism. It blows in the face of the minorities. It causes a wealth gap that is so wide, it's got to be racist. There's got to be a good old boy party that's just treating that race that's in power at the expense of the others. It isn't the people. That's why I say to folks, it isn't your fault things ended up this way. It's the government. Their actions are almost always the culprit. They're always the source of the chaos and conflict that you and I have to deal with around town every day.
Paul, good to have you back.
Great to be back, Mike. Great to be back.
How's everything been these past couple of weeks since we last spoke?
It depends on what subject matter you want to cover. The NBA Finals is about to start in a few days. The government's still in session and in power, and things are starting to, are continuing to be eroded around the country, no matter what state you live in, around the world. We're seeing this erosion of strength, erosion of principles, erosion of truth. So while you were traveling, things have continued to get worse.
Well, let me, and I see that. Let me ask you the question or the opinion, your opinion that everybody's talking about, obviously what happened last week in a courtroom in Manhattan, with Donald Trump being convicted on all 34 counts of nonsense. What's your opinion, Paul? How do you see that?
It's just another disgusting form of manipulation. It's literally like a James Bond movie where some maniac gets in control of the media and starts to use the media to brainwash people over time. And now you're seeing, the fat lady is singing. I mean, veins are popping out of her neck. Her eyes are bulging out of her head. This has to be very near the crescendo of lunacy, where a giant portion of this country is willing to cheer on an unethical, improper, and baseless, manipulated court case to bring charges and smear the legitimacy of a candidate for the office of the President of the United States. I'm literally without words to describe the putrid nature of what that court case and its players, other than the defendant and his team, represent.
Yeah, Paul, having been tried myself 5 times in a courtroom in New York, 4 times in the state, and once with the feds, I've never in my lifetime seen anything like this. And look, we were organized crime back then, and they did their work, but never to this degree. They wouldn't prosecute us, criminals in a criminal organization. They wouldn't prosecute us with this garbage. And to do that to an ex-president, it's so demeaning to our country. And then to stack this illegitimate, trial with an illegitimate judge who's, hell-bent against him. They didn't put it in the lottery. They just chose this guy, a prosecutor who campaigned on getting Trump, and then a jury pool, which, listen, Democrats in a lot of Democrats in New York, they just don't like Trump for whatever reason. And the worst thing I've seen here, well, I can't even say that. Everything was bad. But, for a judge to charge the jury and not specifically name the crime that the defendant is accused of, that they have to, come with a verdict on, and say you have 3 cases, you have 3 incidents, actually. You don't have to be unanimous on all of them. And you can think any one of them happened. He never even pointed out a crime. And this jury came back. They were probably so confused. I don't want to lay the blame on them because the judge's charge means everything, that they came back with a guilty verdict. It's just horrible. I don't know how else to describe it.
But it's also extremely scary when you start to think about what does that mean for that entity in our lives, the government, right? The court, the Justice Department is there to wear a blindfold, and the scales are balanced. And so obviously this is a huge example of what they aren't willing to do for you and I anymore, which is protect us from ideas that are anti-constitutional, anti-America. Where is the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness these days? Right? Is it just living in our minds? It certainly doesn't seem to be represented in Washington or on Wall Street in the financial world. So where we can take this home is we can look at this represented office of the American people, this office representing our interests, we've put them there in one way or another, isn't doing the job we hired them for. They're doing a job that they want to put themselves in charge of, which is against the people, against America, against those who have sacrificed all, gave all for this country to be a democracy. And it should become a call to action, and certainly not for anything silly, but for an awakening within ourselves. We are really up against something nasty, extraordinarily powerful, and worrisome.
No, I agree and wholeheartedly. And you contrast what happened with Trump to what's going on now in a courtroom in Delaware with Hunter Biden, where
Yeah,
he's got his whole family in the courtroom in a town that, they've ruled in for 50 years. For me, the way they're presenting themselves in the courtroom the past 2 days, they're trying to intimidate the jury and everybody else just by their presence. It's unbelievable. And if people can't see this, Paul, I don't even know what to say. I really don't. And Trump has said it best. He said, you know what? This isn't about me anymore. This is about the future of America. This is about taking away the right for citizens to vote for a candidate. 75, 80 million citizens, they're trying to take that right away. And I
yeah.
just hope people can see that. I really do, because I can tell you this, if we have 4 more years of this administration, I don't know where this country's going to be. And, a lot of people have accused me, oh, you're a Trump apologist. I'm not a Trump apologist. I have no horse in this race other than the fact that I have 7 grandchildren and 7 children that I'm concerned about their future. And they just can't withstand another Biden administration, another progressive administration. So for me, it's all about, I hate to call Trump a savior, but I think the real savior is getting Biden out of office and getting a new regime in there to straighten things out. I think that's how we should put it.
Yeah, I'm concerned that if we have 4 more years of this administration or any administration that runs on the Democratic ticket, you'll have 40 more years of this.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we just found out too that I don't know what the word is, pardoned 350,000 more migrants, just turned them loose. They don't have to prove anything. They don't have to vet anything. We don't know anything about them. He just turned them loose. And obviously, the methodology behind this for the progressives and the Democrats is to try to flood, the districts so that we have nothing but blue states. That's been their reasoning the whole time. It's certainly not humanitarian. They just want to maintain power and control forever, and that's what they're doing with this immigration crisis. And they might succeed. Who knows?
Well, they are succeeding for as long as they're in power. You look to me and say, Paul, does Donald Trump have a chance this November? Well, of course, there's a chance, but is there a legitimate reason to think that this election wouldn't be manipulated, likely like the last election was? And we certainly can't get our hands on the proof, but we can certainly glean for our own selves to think, with so much they seem to believe is at stake for the Democrats or the Democrats to be controlling America, wouldn't they pull every single string to make sure? They've now given themselves cover. They could say, well, Trump lost by just a little bit. He did a great job. He ran a hell of a campaign. He lost just by a little bit. And it's probably that guilty verdict in New York that just turned enough people off. That could be total hooey. It's probably going to, and it has certainly in his fundraising capabilities, it will enrage his base. It will activate his base. It'll cause hopefully some independents to think, my God, can I really not vote? I don't like either candidate. How could I not vote this November? I've got to vote against tyranny. I've got to vote against poor ethics and manipulation and dishonesty and treachery. I have to vote to this November to be honoring those who gave all for this country to even be here. So long ago, and humans have a built-in forgetter. We do, in my opinion. But we need to draw attention. We need to see this, many, hundreds of years from the time of the War of Independence started, look at these two times as bookends. What's in the middle? In the middle was an idea for folks to be able to punch as high as they can in life and do it, with their best interests and not harming others at mind as they move to have all they could and create all they could. Reagan called our country the shining city on a hill, shining city on a hill. This November, you have to wake up and vote for the principles of America. It's beyond the candidates. One party represents treachery, and one party represents at least keeping America, or a shot at restoring, in some ways, America to itself.
Yeah, there's no question, Paul. I mean, November 5th is really when people have they can render their verdict at that point in time. And I think people like yourself and myself, we just have to continue to get the truth out there. That's what it's all about. It's all about getting the truth out there, what's really going on. And I just hope people can see it. I mean it. Speaker Johnson was out here a couple of weeks
ago. They've changed a few times.
Yeah. At a fundraiser, and said a lot of great things about the Republican Party, which, for me, I have to say this, they don't have any backbone. They just don't. They don't follow through with any things. They're certainly not as deceitful and anywhere near, what the Democrats do, but they don't follow through. This big impeachment with Biden, they've got all the reasons to pursue this, and then they stop. It's the same thing. But I asked them, I said, Johnson, everything sounds great, but what are you going to do to protect our voting process in November? Because I don't trust them. What do you have in place? Because if this is a thin margin that they're going against between Trump and Biden, I'm like you, I'm very concerned. We can't put our finger on it. They're good at hiding everything. But if it's a close election, I believe we're going to lose it again, because they will do exactly what you said, pull every string, do everything underhanded in their power, okay, to pull this off. And he told me that he has security in place and that, he said all the right things. But, I really question their ability to do that, or I don't know. But that's all we can hope for. We're not in control of that.
The beauty of you, sir, my dear sir, is that you empower people to take action for themselves. Yes, the truth and getting it out there is a mighty job to do and an honorable task to undertake. It's quite the endeavor. But then we also want to encourage folks to act where they can. Yes, you can pull the lever honestly one time for one candidate in November. But what else can you do to try and protect your autonomy and a great description of saved money put to me once was, it gives you the ability to say and do what you want with your time. We've lost Washington. In many ways, we've lost what America started out as a long time ago. In my opinion, a hell of a bankruptcy out in front of us restores our country back to us. It absolutely will. That's just how the world works. Anything artificial, anything in existence that really isn't supported by the earth itself and by the principles of a God-fearing people can't survive. We're looking at a video game of life maybe for the last 30 years, certainly the last 50 years coming off the gold standard. That's where our financial system left reality. It left its restrictions and restraints to reality. It's like we live in a world without gravity. That's not real. So when we look at November, when we look at this political process, when we look at what a mess our country is, people have their hands on the levers somewhere. Everything that's going on mostly in our lives today, some person or a group of people made a choice to make that happen. What choices can our people watching today make for themselves that they might be afraid to make, that they might think, oh, I'll just wait and see kind of thing? That's fear. Courage doesn't live within us, Mike. I think you might agree. We have to reach for it. That's why 10 people pull their cars over on the side of a bridge and look at the caravan that went off into the river, and one person jumps in to save that family of 4. It doesn't live within us. We have to reach for it. And I implore people with my message, it isn't necessarily about gold and silver. It's about taking the leap that you feel you ought to letting us help you find that courage that you need to find to make that move that you've probably been wanting to make for a long time, because Washington and Wall Street seem out of control. How can Main Street still be in control? You guys in your small towns can't wag the country by yourselves. So how do you preserve what you have for yourself?
Well, let me ask you this. You bring up an interesting point. Patrick Bet-David, not too long ago, on one of his podcasts, he brought up the fact he compared investments in the stock market, gold, and real estate over the past, I don't know, 25 years or so. And according to, he showed some stats, and I obviously didn't, check them out. But he said the safest investment was in Wall Street, stocks, real estate second, and gold third.
Mhm.
Now, I innately disagree with that. And I want you to explain.
Yeah.
Patrick didn't render a decision either way. He said, these are the stats. I want you to explain. Then I have another question, two questions.
Sure.
What were the circumstances that caused us to go off the gold standard many, many years ago?
Sure. Great. I need to get a Karl Rove whiteboard so I can write some things up and hold it right here in this, that fits into the size of the screen. I've talked many times about this inflationary wind. So picture a wind that ought not to exist, ought not to be happening, and it's financial, right? It's blowing out of the Federal Reserve, the federal government, and even in the financial world itself. Well, one example of creating this inflationary wind is the ability to. The main character is the ability to print money out of thin air. So where does that money end up? Right. To me, a layperson, it makes sense to me that money eventually, as it flows through people's hands and checking accounts and pays bills, and payrolls end up in the excess money finds its way into the stock market, into Wall Street, or the real estate market. That to me is where money generally cul-de-sacs. It's like it's just where it ends up. So if you think of the market, you think of the real estate market as a vessel. If capital pours into it, it just expands in size, right? So what is the main driver? The real estate market is the easiest to look at, and how it expanded since leaving the gold standard. So I can answer these two questions almost at the same time. When we leave the gold standard, we leave restraints and restrictions. People don't have to have those belts as tight as they used to be. Credit starts to flow to the American people, certainly flows to the corporate world, where you can do things with money you don't have. We'll still end up as individuals in bankruptcy court a lot faster than a corporation will. But when you look at living beyond your means, that's where you end up eventually if you can't support yourself organically. So in 1971, when Nixon decides with I'm sure economic advisors that might have come from Wall Street whispering in his ear, listen, we can take over the whole world. We can stop living with this stupid restriction of our money supply being limited by how many ounces of gold are sitting in the vault. So just like having a dog on a leash, right? I had a Samoyed a long time ago as a kid. He would get out of the house at night, and there were numerous dogs around the neighborhood that were having puppies. So when that financial dog gets let off its leash, it can get itself into all kinds of trouble. There's no more restrictions. There's no more checks and balances on that power anymore. We can't vote that the Fed stop printing money. So over the last 50 years, you've got an inflationary wind that even exacerbates racism, because it generally does blow at the backs of the college educated. It blows at the backs of the majority of people already in a healthy position in the workforce. And it blows in the face of those perhaps without the college education. It blows in the face of the minorities. It causes a wealth gap that is so wide, it's got to be racist. There's got to be a good old boy party that's just treating that race that's in power at the expense of the others. It isn't the people. That's why I say to folks, it isn't your fault things ended up this way. It's the government. Their actions are almost always the culprit. They're always the source of the chaos and conflict that you and I have to deal with around town every day. Creating this inflationary wind has inflated the value of everything to a point where it's well beyond reality. And here's a couple numbers for you. In 1971, right before Nixon ends this relationship, this restriction on our money supply by the amount of ounces in the vault of gold in the vault, that leash, if you will, the median, an average price in America was $17,000. Your salary was $9,000 a year. Notice the relationship that the house costs twice as much as your annual salary. Mm-hmm. You come off the gold standard 50 years later, poverty is 25 grand a year. which is 300% more than the average income in America in 1971. You are at poverty at $25,000 a year, and a home is $440,000. The last piece to understand how ridiculous this elevation in asset values is the population has only grown by 40%. You only have 40% more humans in a line at the bank to get a mortgage. So if we go back to home prices in 1971, 20 grand, let's just round it up to $20,000, and you have 40% more buyers in line chasing after that real estate. Simple math tells you an average home today should be $28,000, but it's $440,000. And that's another reason why so many people are pissed off, brokenhearted, disenfranchised, angry, envious, and jealous, because there's so many people that could never afford a home today. And it's all due to the fact that Richard Nixon and his advisors, which I'm sure came from the financial world, said, hey, we could really take over the world if we could flood the world with our currency. And it happened. We mostly took over the world for a very long time. We tell people in countries what to do. We make them do what we want, because the power to withhold that access to our capital would bankrupt them. But it gutted the family system here in America. It gutted the chance for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness here in America for everybody. It restricted those who would get this inflationary wind to blow at their backs and excluded most people that live here. And to me, that action is evil. And it's one thing that burns in my gut every single day that I run around mostly pissed off about the stupid choices our Washington and Wall Street has made at our expense over the last 100, 110, and certainly the last 50 years coming after Nixon's choice. I hope that helps. It's artificial.
It hasn't gotten any better, because we're at $35 trillion in debt right now, and climbing every second.
What is a life lived without principles, lived without honoring the rules and the regs, right? It's a life that's in the ditch, right? It's a life full of wreckage and carnage and conflict and frustration. That's what the Constitution was supposed to keep in place, regardless of who came to work in the offices there. It didn't matter who came to work in Washington. The Constitution remains. They quit honoring that piece of paper a long time ago.
Well, let me ask you, back then, prior to Nixon's, determination or ruling at that time, was our currency 100% supported by gold?
Yes. 100%. Again, if you want to increase the money supply, throw billions of dollars we're in the steam shovel age mostly up until then, at mining gold out of the ground. You can print all the money you want if you're adding the appropriate amount of gold to the Federal Reserves.
That was my next question. Why the responsible thing would have been, let's just mine more gold. Let's do it.
Yeah, the responsible thing. But that's what, again, this distinction of the Trump trial and the thing that's going on with Biden and Delaware. Look, use that to contrast how bad things actually are and have been for a very long time. The smart thing to do, right, would have been to honor the people that live here and represent their interests. The stupid and evil thing to do would have been to sacrifice the American family, sacrifice mom's choice if she wanted to stay home and raise kids. No, she needs to go to work now. You see, when you leave the gold standard, the cost of living far outpaces your personal wage growth. You might get a 2% raise a year, but if you average things out, going back to 1971, it seems to me by the assessment I've made, inflation has been about 8% a year. So you're just drowning and drowning and drowning. And here 50 years later, 34 trillion in debt, more personal and social unrest than ever before. Ever. This makes look like Mississippi burning in that time in our country's history like a circus. This is nationwide. This is worldwide. The average home ownership, average age for a new home in this country used to be in the mid-20s. You were 20-something years old when you would buy a home. Today, it's 36 years young. In Europe, it's 38. Your kids are half raised by then. So we grow up in this country and in Europe as renters. One of the other things that Bill Clinton did when he was president It was a good idea, but it certainly had nasty outcomes. Just like Reagan said, the government's solutions to its problems are worse than its damn problems. He wanted banks to be able to lend to people that didn't have perfect credit. He wanted to give more folks a shot at the American dream, home ownership. And the banks were like, they must have said, we kind of lend money to people who don't need it for a reason. So we don't have any troubles and we live on. Mm-hmm. He said, well, what if I let you lend more money than you had? Oh, great. No problem. Sign us up. So fractional lending was invented where banks could lend 10 times the amount of money they're sitting on. So if you have $100,000 in a checking account, they can loan out $1 million. That in a way is also like printing money. Printing money these days, guys, just means that there's money being created out of thin air. They're not actually printing $100 bills and mailing it to people. They just enter the figures on an Excel spreadsheet and it exists. So when you look at 08, because when he was president 20-something years later, you look at the housing insanity of 05, 06, and 07, that was fueled by people being able to flip homes they didn't live in. When we're back in reality, remember I said our population from 71 to today has only increased by 40%. You have the ability for people to own 10 or 20 homes. You have the ability now for hedge funds to own college campuses in the whole town and all the condos around the college campus. I mean, it's nauseating. And all of that action in pursuit of profit pushes harder and harder against us individuals to enjoy life here.
So really, Paul, the actions of Washington until this very day, we can't call them illegal, probably unconstitutional, but they're absolutely immoral because all they continue to do is put this country and all of its citizens deeper and deeper in debt on a daily basis. All this money that they're sending everywhere is money that we don't have. They're just printing. Is there really what's the value behind any of this at this point? Is it just the word of the government that, hey, we're gonna back it up? There's nothing else.
It's just that's what everyone decides to use when they wake up in the morning. Around the world, they use the dollar. And so in my recent Substack article, you mentioned the word, we couldn't find the government folks from, guilty of doing something illegal. In my opinion, you can. In 1933, when they decided after 4 years of us being in the Depression, they had no good ideas and they didn't want to come to us and talk to us out here. Hey, single family parent, how would you solve this Depression problem? They didn't want to talk to us. They made our money illegal. They made our money illegal. We used gold as money back then. You go into the grocery store and you use an ounce of gold, you walk out with a week's worth of groceries. Gold back then was $20. Now look at the destruction of our currency. What could you get at the grocery store today with $20?
Nothing.
A sandwich.
Yeah.
Right? What could you get with an ounce of gold today at the grocery store? A week's worth of groceries for 5 families. Hmm. So when you look at how they decided to solve the Great Depression, again, someone must have been whispering in the president's ear, hey, if we can print $5 billion, we can incentivize factories and corporations to spin up their assembly lines again, get the workers back to work, and out of the Great Depression will come. Great. But the way they had to do it was make gold illegal. They made it illegal for us to hold or use as money. When we turned it all into the bank, we got our $20 an ounce for it. They weighed out what they had. It wasn't enough to print 5 billion. So they raised gold's price. Here's the second injury. They raised gold's price to 35 an ounce. So if you had $100 in your checking account, it was now worth $40.
Wow.
Overnight. And they called the whole thing the New Deal. The New Deal. The greatest betrayal of principles in America happened in 1933 because, listen, I don't want to talk about money all day, but money, that is how if we have some, make some, right? We're not stressed. Kids are good. Like you said before, 7 grandkids, you're worried about their future. What's one of the main ingredients to that future? Financial autonomy, financial stability, financial predictability. In a world where the government decides what it wants to do with our money, that's what's caused so much havoc in our hearts and minds when we wake up in the morning out here in the real world. In 1933, they made your money illegal. And that's where they started to enslave us as just workers. We're not citizens anymore. We're certainly not in a damn partnership with Washington. We're just workers. They just see us as things that create economic output.
Yeah.
That's disgusting to me.
Well, it is, Paul, and it's and they just wantonly, it's other people's money. They just keep printing, and it's really nobody's money. There's nothing behind it. I asked you this question last time. I got to ask you again. How do we get out from under $34 trillion in debt and counting every moment?
And I hope to you and I hope to everyone when I get fired up, I don't mean to sound like I'm lecturing or I'm a know-it-all. I'm just like everyone here who happened to read a lot about all this and study everything I can find, and then come to I can see things clearly, at least in a way that I believe makes sense. You can't, and stop looking at 34 trillion in debt as debt. If I borrowed $1,000 from you, we could call that a debt. Why? Because I intend to pay it back, and you expect me to pay it back. No one's paying back $1 trillion in debt. The government doesn't produce anything but chaos. A corporation produces some kind of good or service. The government doesn't produce anything but a cost. The $34 trillion to you and other folks should represent just how gigantic this Grand Canyon sized hole in our financial books is. It's literally just the sum of all of the bills we can't pay mostly over the last 24 years. Since the year 2000, debt was $4 trillion. The dollar was worth 56 cents. Today, debt is 34 trillion. In a few months, I'm sure it'll be 35, and on and on and on. So all that sum really is the amount of bills our economy, led by the government, cannot produce enough revenue to pay those bills. We are not an economy, in my estimation, that operates in the black. We're operating more and more in the red. Every year, it gets worse. Just since 2008, for every $11, this is how woefully just failing this effort has been by the government. Since 2008, for every $11 they create in debt, we've gotten $1 in revenue. Mm. It's not debt. It's just, we need another word for it. But what it truly is, because it's never going to be repaid. We don't have to keep saying, our kids, are saddled with $100,000 in debt or whatever. Every person in America is 110 grand or whatever the figure is, because that's just not the real way to look at it. Look at it at how failed the enterprise is. The financial enterprise of America Incorporated, led by the government and its advisors, have completely wrecked our financial future, our financial autonomy, our position of strength around the world as leaders to the world. Starting in 33, starting again in 71, starting again when the 2008 recession hit, starting yesterday, starting today. So how do you survive this? You make sure your money outlasts theirs. To me, there's 4 places for your money: cash, real estate, in the financial world, or in the vault. So which one, to the folks that are listening, by design, offers you the predictability, security, and privacy for you and your retirement savings? So eventually, to me, mathematically, there has to be a nasty bankruptcy. Rome went through it. Spain went through it. Portugal, the Dutch, the French, the British will go through it. Mathematically, it's unstoppable. How do you go through it? So when this ship sinks, you don't have to be on. And then, to me, you get your country back. No one's going to care anymore about, like, Bernie Sanders' gross idea of printing $97 trillion to have a fully green economy. Those ideas and all of the idiots that espouse those stupid ideas will go away. There'll never be a camera in their face or a microphone in their face again. But you're going to have to, the people listening are going to have to take matters into their own hands, reach for that courage, and make some choices. And to me, there's only 4 things you can really do with your money. Look at it from the perspective of where is it located.
Well, Paul, let me ask you this. What does bankruptcy actually mean? Let's say the United States, which it's heading down that cliff, it's going to happen at some point in time, goes bankrupt. What does that mean for all of us?
It means that the largesse of the government shrinks back to that which we want to support. We're the revenue generators. The government is not. When Reagan took office, just for another comparison, the government payroll, DOD and the government, for the year was $75 billion a year. Today, it's $1.4 trillion. a year. That bankruptcy, yeah, those people won't be working for the government anymore. And we will look very, very intently at exactly what problems need solving today. And it won't be all this stupid stuff the government decides to. I mean, maybe it's justified, but I'm in a restaurant the other day with my family, and I happened to notice on the news that they're going after some ticket sales company for antitrust. We got the problems in Israel. We got the problems in Ukraine. We got the problems in Taiwan. And we have all these problems here. But they want to be focusing their time and effort on whether there's some kind of monopoly with ticket sales to a concert. That's what they want to focus on? You walk down the streets in many cities, you see people defecating on the sidewalk. You see people can't afford a home. You see poverty at $25,000 a year. Solve those problems. So, sorry, I get passionate about this.
I love the passion, Paul. People wake up to this. So let me ask you a question. You got $100,000 in the bank. This country goes bankrupt. What does that mean to you?
Well, again, then, I personally believe how you'll experience this bankruptcy, this recession, depression, driven by where your money was located when it happened. So if it's in the dollar, there's an attack on that. The dollar on average has been losing a penny and a half a year since the year 2000. Today it's worth 2.7 cents. Simple math says next year it's worth 1.2 cents. Now that should help you understand the proximity to which there is no more influencing our horrific financial circumstances to the positive side, and the negative side takes over. So if your money's in the dollar in a safe at home, if you have 100 grand in cash in a safe at your house, the dollar inside that safe is under attack from outside forces. You could drive it on to real estate, but you'd be buying real estate, $1 million home today. One way to understand, well, how overvalued is real estate? $1 million home today, priced in a 3 penny dollar, is only worth 30 grand, priced in a 100 penny dollar. And that's another visualization of the inflationary wind that I tried to talk about earlier. That wind has just elevated asset values artificially. And if you look at the financial world, make your own choices. Do you rather trust on the right side of the street a depository? It doesn't make loans and doesn't risk money. It just has armed guards and security measures protecting your money. People need to make their own choice. So it's cash, real estate, in the financial world, or in the vault. Where do you think you survive when that tornado comes ripping through your town? Your house might not. Your cars might get flipped over. Your property, the trees get tossed about. But all of your finances could be down in the bunker. You can carry those back up to the level side of Earth as soon as you hear the wind stop blowing.
So we're going to go back to the days when, what was in the ground, minerals, and really have the value. I've been a proponent of gold, my whole life. I was always a little leery of the stock market. Real estate, okay, it's great, but I've seen it fluctuate so much. I was always leery of that also, but gold will always have its value, no question. Gold you can hold in your hand, or like you said, in a depository.
That's the difference. You can hold it. And it might sound silly, like, why would I want to walk around with sacks of gold or silver, et cetera? To me, the world is well beyond going back on any gold standard. And if we are living in a time where the electrical grid is fried or some horrific set of circumstances has come that's biblical in nature, well, then you'd be damn happy that you can transact around town for goods and services with gold and silver. But I'm not ever thinking that you're going to walk into a Walmart and walk out of there with gold and silver. But I would say you can't go shopping at Walmart with stock in Walmart. You can't protect your home with stock in Smith & Wesson. So all this is the returning of your retirement savings to something real, restoring your savings to its roots. Think of gold and silver as a bridge. How close are we to the cliff's edge now? Pretty close, perhaps. And then how far across this chasm do I need this bridge to be until we're on the other side? That's what gold and silver is. It's the bridge over that you want to start building before we go over the cliff's edge. And then you're on that gold and silver bridge and not down in the fray and not down in the bankruptcy until we come to the other side of this, because this is still America. This is still America. There's still a heartbeat that beats inside of America that is fully American. And it's going to get its day in the sun again.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think there's any single worldwide event that can trigger this bankruptcy, or do you think we just keep going over this cliff until, I don't know, another war? There's a call on our money that we just can't answer. We can't answer it now, but it hasn't been called upon yet. Do you think there's anything that can trigger this bankruptcy, this disaster that's coming at some point in time?
The bankruptcy was triggered in 1971. It's playing out over the last 53 years, and the dollar's worth 2.7 cents. When you look at how eroded the dollar will be next year, perhaps it's worth, 1.2 cents. So both is the answer to your question. There could be an event, and there also could just be the lunacy that continues to represent the choice making in Washington and Wall Street tomorrow. Isaac Newton once said that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. So the decision making by Washington and Wall Street over the last many, many decades seems to stay the same. They're not going to change their decision making. They're not going to change their objectives for seizing more power from us. What would interrupt them restoring power to us? A bankruptcy. So it just ends up happening because there's nothing left. Again, if you thought of money as a resource instead of cash or money, think of it as a resource. So if the dollar was something the government was mining out of the ground, they've removed 97% of the value of that mine. What have they been doing with what they took out of the ground? Paying bills with it. Why do they have to do that? Because the economy doesn't produce enough revenue inside of its walls to pay its own bills. So they've been digging the money up out of the ground, throwing it at their bills, and 3% of that mine remains in the ground to be dug up and thrown at bills we can't pay. That's the clearest picture, the visualization that everyone can get that the government has no business running your business. None. If this is their track record and they work for, some corporation, they would all be fired months into the job.
Well, Paul, it seems that, it's almost an impossible task to make people aware of just how serious this problem is. And, this is almost to me, almost an impossible task is to get people in Washington, people in government that are as passionate as you are about this and say, hey, we've got to do something about this now before this bankruptcy that's been continuing since 71 just really, smacks in all of our faces and that's it. How do we do that? I mean, and I got to say this, Paul, and for everybody that's listening, you're in the gold business, but I can see you're in the gold business because you care about people.
Yeah.
You care about what's going on in this country. You have a passion. You're disgusted by it. I get it. And, for that reason alone, people should really pay attention to what you have to say, because this is not just a business for you.
No.
It's a passion. And I hope people are hearing this and understanding this because it's very real. What Paul is saying is very real. It's factual. Everything that he said, and we are heading off of a cliff that's going to be a disaster. And I think the only thing that we can count on is gold and precious metals like this, gold and silver, because when that does hit, we need to have something in value and we have to have it in our hands. And I really appreciate, everything that you're saying. I appreciate your passion and your commitment, to making the American people aware of how they can, at least safeguard, themselves and their families, because that's what this is all about for you.
Yeah. That Bible story of David versus Goliath. In this country, I think we hear that every time someone with courage and 5 feet tall stands to some giant monster, David wins.
Yeah.
I think we have to be concerned that most of us wouldn't want to be David. And we wouldn't beat Goliath 9 times out of 10, maybe 1 out of 100. Maybe one every single time someone stands to Goliath with that intense courage, I'd go fight Goliath for everyone listening. And if I lost my life for that, I died in an honorable way. But we don't have to fight this Goliath. We can get out of the ring. We can just step aside. This isn't a fight for God's glory. This is a fight in a different way for your own. That you stand up, find the courage to understand that if you continue to reside with your finances in tow with the government's choice making, then you suffer the decisions of that choice making. Find the courage inside yourselves to make sure that you get to say and do what you want with your time. And to me, the biggest smile that ever crosses God's face is when he sees his kids act with courage.
Well, Paul, I don't think I could have said it any better. I know I couldn't, and I think this is a perfect place to end. And I just hope people are really paying attention to this, because with all the problems that we are facing, this really is probably the most serious one, and we need a call to action. Maybe you and I can get together to, because you've got me so concerned now, rightfully so. It's been in the back of my mind, but you get involved in every other thing, and you look at every other problem we have in this country and throughout the world, and this kind of gets pushed to the side a moment. But this could conceivably happen in our lifetime, certainly in our kids or our grandchildren's lifetime. I mean, it's that imminent, because our government people just continue to be irresponsible, continue to send money here and there and print it up, and with just negligent behavior, irresponsible behavior, they don't care. And we have to take hold of this. So maybe you and I can get together privately, and there's more that we can do other than sounding the alarm here, over the social media waves. But I'd love to explore that with you, really.
I would be honored. I would be honored.
Well, let's leave it at that. Thank you again. Appreciate your time, Paul. We're going to do this for all our viewers. We're going to do this on occasion. We're going to keep sounding the alarm, and we're going to keep giving you the solution. And Paul's company is viable and open to you, and you can see the passion that he has. I really, really, really encourage you to get in touch with him. He's not only a financial advisor, he's a true American that cares about all of you, and wants to see this country get back on track, and at least preserve the future for yourself and your family. So, Paul, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, and we will stay in touch.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, and God bless you and everyone listening. And even if you aren't listening, God bless you too.
Well, thank you for that.
My friends, I'll tell you, I'm really high on Colonial Metals Group. I really am. And not because of the great things that they're doing, they are, but really because of Paul Stone, who's the owner of the company, the gentleman I had the pleasure of meeting. I actually had a sit down with him, and we're going to be posting that because Paul has such valuable information to share about our financial system, about its history. He's really got some great things that you need to hear, people. Very, very, very important. And what I like about Paul, he really has a passion to help people. That's why he got into this business and into this company. He really does. It's meaningful to him. So when we took him on as a sponsor, we really did our homework. Obviously, we vetted him, but I've got to know him even more, and I trust him. And trust is a major, major factor in a lot of things, but especially when you're relying on somebody for your finances. So Colonial Metals Group, it actually helped me with my goal of protecting my financial future. Look, I'm 73 years old. Hopefully I'm going to have a number of years left, and I want to protect my future like anyone else. I don't trust the banks 100%. I certainly don't trust the government. And being at the whim of the stock market or the current administration, it doesn't make me feel safe. It doesn't make me feel secure. And you should feel the same way, because anything can go upside down with both the stock market and our government, as we see in everyday life. We see what's going on. But having a self-directed IRA where I can safely store gold and silver, hard assets that have stood the test of time, no matter what the economy or the government policies are, well, that makes sense to me. Hard assets, I can hold them, I can control them, I don't have to rely on anybody else. It makes sense. It gives you a sense of security, and I like that. Colonial Metals Group, they really helped me create a self-directed IRA where I can have direct access to my assets. In other words, I can hold them in my hand, whenever I want to. So you should let the team of experts at CMG help you protect your family's future also. I can tell you this, their level of professionalism, their ability to listen, makes it very easy for you to learn everything you need to know about preserving all you've worked for. And I'm sure you've worked hard all your life. Why would you want to see it, thrown away? Why would you want to wake up on a Friday after Thursday, the bank's telling you everything is okay, and Friday morning they crash? Why would you want to wake up, God forbid the stock market crashes or your particular investment goes belly up? It happens. Companies are laying off people left and right today. You know, we don't know what's going on. And people, let me tell you something. This country is $34 trillion in debt and climbing every second. We are heading off a cliff, a financial cliff. There's no question about it. You need to start thinking about your future and holding on to an asset that you know is always going to have value no matter what. Maybe you're just getting started. Maybe you already have a 401k or an IRA. Maybe you're thinking about your parents' retirement. Regardless, CMG, they can help you. Now, we put together a very special offer for our audience. Very special. You click on the link in the description below where you call the special 800 number, and right now you'll receive a safe where you can put your assets in, your jewelry, anything that you have. They're going to give you an actual safe and up to 10 grand in free silver. Up to 10 grand, depending upon the situation. People, that's an offer you shouldn't refuse. This is about your financial future. You're dealing with a very trustworthy company, more trustworthy than the government, the banks, or the stock market. Trust me with that. Gold and silver, I've always believed in it. I always have. And now I feel even more secure knowing that I'm dealing with somebody in Paul Stone and his company, CMG, that I can really trust. So make the call today. Get your free safe. 10 grand in free silver, up to 10 grand. Let me be clear in that. And I stand behind this man. So do it today. Yes, it's an offer you can't refuse. Take care.